Hello, and welcome to Most Marvelous NYC, a podcast where licensed New York City tour guides share their years of experience to help you get your very best New York City experience. We're your hosts. I'm Megan.
I'm JT.
And we're going to help you navigate the ins and outs of New York City. This is a mini-sode.
Mini-sode.
We've chosen a very fun topic for this mini-sode, which is
kind of the things that you should do while you're here in New York City in the most basic sense.
Yeah, the must-sees for New York City, especially if this is your first trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say as tour guides, both me and JT, we get asked this on
all the time,
daily basis, every
all
day, whether or not it's from our tour guests, it might be via email or DM or just in the comments. So we thought we'd make a video about it.
Or just friends and family, people who've never, I'm going to be here. Are you available? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available. Well, what should I do?
Exactly.
So this is a really quick and easy list about things to do in New York City that are going to basically check all the boxes. And I mean, I think some of this is going to be no surprise to people who have been listening to the podcast and watching this. But the number one thing on the list is, I'm going to let Megan take this.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
An observation deck. I am an observation deck nut. I love them. I could go to all of them. I think every single observation deck has something wonderful to offer. We have an entire episode about observation decks.
All the different options you have.
So if you really want to deep dive into which one to go to, listen to that episode. But for, my money, I don't care which observation deck you go to. You just have to go to one of them. And our current observation decks are Empire State Building, Top of the Rock, One World Observatory, Edge at Hudson Yards, and Summit One Vanderbilt. Choose one.
In chronological order.
It is in chronological order. Choose one and be happy.
Yeah, because really it's seeing the city from up above is getting the context of the whole city. All 5 boroughs, the rivers around it, the suburbs surrounding it, all of the infrastructure, the bridges, the skyline. It's just such a great overview. And it's something that I love to recommend that people do early on so that they kind of are like, oh, right, Central Park is north of us. I see that. I can envision it. I see the avenues. It really gives you that sense of like, here I am in the middle of all of this, and it's starting to make a little more sense. One of my number one favorite things to tell people to do is to see the city from the air and then also to see it from the water. And there's a lot of different great options for that. My number one favorite option is also a way of seeing the Statue of Liberty for free. And that's to go down to the southern tip of Manhattan Island and take the Staten Island ferry across to Staten Island, half an hour trip out, half an hour trip back. But there's other really interesting options too. There's the citywide ferry system, which costs less than $3. Is it $2.90 at this point, or is it
I think
still
it's the
$2.75?
I'm not sure.
It's really inexpensive, and those will go even further and take you to some other really interesting places, and you can use those as a way to get to a place like Williamsburg, for example. And so that's a great way. And there are a lot of boat cruises like Circle Line, which is the classic, but also some of the nicer, fancier boats, the classic city tours. I think that's what that's called.
Classic Harbor Line offers very beautiful tours.
On very beautiful boats.
My personal favorite du jour, it is a City Experiences boat. It is called the Bateau Premier Dinner Cruise. You get what I consider to be a very nice dinner. You get to see the Statue of Liberty at night. You get to see the city all lit up at night. I did it 2 years ago, and it still sticks with me as one of my favorite things I've ever done in New York City. And I would say that's saying a lot because I've done a lot in New York City. I also like the boat tours. Circle Line has boat tours. New York Water Taxi has boat tours. So if you want to learn about the skyline, you're really paying for that tour in addition to the views.
Yeah. So let's see. Which one do you want to choose next?
Times Square. I personally believe if you come to New York City and you do not go to Times Square, you are doing it wrong. I am not saying that you need to spend all of your time in Times Square or even the majority of your time in Times Square, but you have to visit Times Square because there's this unique, vibrant energy. And I believe there's a lot to do, to see, to eat. If you go see a Broadway show, you're going to pass through Times Square. And we are coming to you from the Welcome to
Mhm.
Times Square office in Times Square. Welcome to Times Square owns a giant billboard in the heart of Times Square where you can put a photo of your choice on this billboard for 24 hours, and it only costs $150. And if you use the code Megan10, you get 10% off. You can also use a video. You can put one of your brands up there. It's a really unique experience and a magical way to interact with Times Square. Visit timesquarebillboard.com to book today.
Don't forget the code Megan10. So I actually think that Times Square is most vibrant, most exciting at night. And I also tell people if it rains during your visit, don't be sad. Get to Times Square once the sun goes down, because the photographs of Times Square with rain soaked streets are not just iconic, but they're beautiful and they offer up a lot of really interesting photographic opportunities. So I always say go to Times Square at night, because that's one of the other things that's on this list is see a live performance. And of course, Broadway is one of the best ways to see an absolute world-class live performance, but it is absolutely not the only way. There are an incredible number of music venues across the city. No matter what kind of music you're interested, whether it's classical or jazz or Latin or hip hop or pop music or anything, New York City has an option for that, and it is going to be world class. So, theater, Broadway, off Broadway, music, go see a live performance, spoken word, um,
Burlesque.
burlesque. It is one of the things that New York City does better than just about every other city in the world. I don't feel at all conflicted in saying that. I don't think that there's a whole lot of qualifiers. New York City is a live performance city, and it is absolutely, I think, imperative
And
that you
there's
go and take advantage of that.
There's performances for every budget. You can see world-class performances with world-famous actors for free. You can also go into, like, these little tiny venues, and you
Mhm.
can see the people who might become Bob Dylan, Lady Gaga, Peter, Paul, and Mary, whoever the next star is performing before their careers really jet off. It's magical. See a live performance.
And this is the other thing too, is I think a lot of people think like, oh, live performance, that's going to be A, expensive. Not really. And B, mostly geared towards adults. There's not a lot of good kids stuff, but that's absolutely not true. There are some fantastic theaters that are producing and presenting, again, world-class theater for all sorts of kids, whether they're very young or a little bit older. It is worth pursuing that and looking for that kind of information, because that is out there too, and it is also really incredible. Let's see. You want to choose one off of here?
Yeah. Fifth Avenue.
I
I
was
think
hoping you'd do that one.
I love Fifth Avenue. There's many different ways of experiencing Fifth Avenue. I personally like to start at the southeast corner of Central Park. If you're a Gossip Girl fan like me, that's where you'll find Blair Waldorf's Duck Pond. You'll also find the Plaza Hotel right there. Home Alone 2 was filmed partly there. So I like to start at 59th Street and Fifth Avenue, right at that southeast corner of the park, say hi to the park. And then I like to walk down Fifth Avenue to Rockefeller Center. And as you walk down Fifth Avenue, you're going to see all of those giant flagship stores. Even if you don't want to buy anything because they're real expensive, a lot of these stores, just the buildings are historic. Some of them used to be Gilded Age mansions. So just to see them is
Mhm.
amazing. There's some churches that are also very historic. One where Teddy Roosevelt's son got married and Teddy Roosevelt attended with his Rough Rider friends. And then as you walk down, you're going to get to Saks Fifth Avenue. In many ways, that's the crown jewel of Fifth Avenue, especially at Christmas time. and then you'll see Rockefeller Center. And you can go explore Rockefeller Center, perhaps go to Top of the Rock. If it's Christmas time, see the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. And I like to start at Central Park and go south because I shop a lot. And if I buy things, I don't want to be carrying my bags through Central Park. So I like to start at Central Park and then get my bags and then go to my hotel.
That's fair. That's thinking. That's thinking. Yeah, I agree. Fifth Avenue and all of those things, including St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is iconic, Rockefeller Center, absolutely a must see. And again, these are not necessarily things that you need to spend an entire day doing. The walk that you just described from 59th to essentially 49th is a half a mile. I mean, you can walk that easily in 15 minutes if you don't stop. So we're talking about an hour, hour and a half if you're not really spending a ton of time doing shopping, and you're going to be able to check all of this stuff off your list. Now, I happen to like some of the architecture, and I'm a real museum guy. So you could start at the Metropolitan Museum of Art on 81st Street and make your way down through Central Park, come out on 59th Street, and then continue making your way down to 49th and Rockefeller Center. That's going to be a little bit of a longer day, a little bit more of a walk, but you're going to throw in some of the gorgeous mansions and elaborate apartment buildings alongside Fifth Avenue on the Upper East Side. So there's a couple of different ways that you can sort of lengthen this and play with it a little bit more, spend a little more time doing it or a little less time. But once you've got that checked off, you're really doing well in terms of being able to get a sense of the most famous things in New York City.
And there's a zoo there that you can see as
Oh, in the
well.
Central Park Zoo, you can see the sea lions. And in fact, yesterday we were at the zoo and we saw the grizzly bear walking around. If you kind of know where to look, we saw the grizzly. I've never seen the grizzly bear as much as we saw it yesterday. So the other thing too that's interesting, and we're going to talk about this too, is that if you are going to do Central Park for Central Park, you want to spend a little bit more time there. The easiest way to do it is to walk across the park from 72nd Street, from west to east or east to west. It doesn't really matter. But one of the most famous and popular parts of Central Park is at West 72nd Street on the west side of the park. And that's Strawberry Fields, and the building where John Lennon and Yoko Ono lived. That's the Dakota. It's the oldest building on that corner. It'll be really easy to recognize. It's got this beautiful entryway with these big gas lanterns on West 72nd Street, just off of the park. And Strawberry Fields is the black and white tile mosaic that says Imagine in the middle. And you will see groups of people paying tribute to John Lennon's life and legacy, and almost always a musician playing songs from John and the Beatles. So that's another little iconic taste of Central Park. I mean,
and as you keep walking through, you get to Bethesda Terrace.
Oh, yes.
I have an entire video where I actually take you on this walk. So if you really want to deep dive into the walk, know exactly where you're going, check out that video. But it's where you're going to see most of the most recognizable areas of the park. And I would budget in about an hour for this walk.
Central Park is interesting because if you're not going along one of the avenues, like Fifth Avenue on the east side or Central Park West, essentially 8th Avenue on the west side, it does get a little twisty and turny, and you can't always see where you're going. So you do want to budget a little bit of time for you to course correct. There's not a straight path across the park that you're really going to be able to take. They'll be going up hills and around curves and discovering things like Bow Bridge and the Boathouse and the mall, which are all along that 72nd Street kind of cross from east to west or west to east.
Exactly.
All right. Now who goes next?
What's our next thing? Oh, the Brooklyn Bridge and Lower Manhattan. I love Lower Manhattan. People are always asking me what my favorite tour to give is. And I always say Lower Manhattan. If I could only give one tour, it would be Lower Manhattan. A large part of this is because I really love American Revolutionary War history. And so much of the American Revolutionary War began at the southern tip of the island of Manhattan. So there's lots of tales of, Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, Hercules Mulligan, George Washington. And there's a lot of buildings directly related to them. We're very proud of that history. It's also where you'll find Wall Street. You'll find the big sculpture of a charging bull.
Not on Wall Street, but a little further south on Broadway.
Correct. It's a deceptive name. People call it the Charging Bull of Wall Street. There's some museums down there, including the Federal Hall Memorial Museum, which I believe is still free. And it has the Bible that George Washington used when he took his oath of office to become the very first president of the constitutional United States. So I really just think you need to see Lower Manhattan. I would argue that you should do it with a tour because there are so many secrets that you
That
just would
is
never know
another one of our must-dos.
without a tour. And then really close, you can walk over the Brooklyn Bridge really easily. I love to do it at sunset. And then this is kind of like a tour guide fight, but I like to walk from Manhattan to Brooklyn and then reward myself with amazing pizza in Brooklyn at the end of the walk.
I actually think that this is one of the few things that's on this list of must-dos that you could actually split into two, or schedule the whole day for.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I love, and I know this list is very Manhattan heavy, and we're going to acknowledge that, but I lived in Brooklyn for over 20 years, and I love the Brooklyn Bridge also. I love the spots where you can get amazing ice cream and famous pizza over on the Brooklyn side. But Brooklyn Heights is an absolutely spectacular neighborhood. This kind of ties into one of our other must-dos, which is explore a neighborhood. So you can explore Brooklyn Heights and just wander down these beautiful, quiet, tree-lined streets. It sounds different. It smells different. People always say it smells so much nicer over in Brooklyn. And the buildings are from the early 1800s. It is a residential neighborhood, and you can almost hear these old voices of families that own sailing ships and waiting for these ships to come into the harbor just across the way, and imagining the prosperity that these cargoes are going to bring to their family. It's an incredibly evocative neighborhood. There's some great spots to eat. Some of them are nicer restaurants. One of them is my favorite, really one of my favorite sentimental diners in the city, Clark's Corner Diner, on the corner of Clark and Henry. That is just a fantastic neighborhood to explore. And then you're right there by the Brooklyn Bridge. You can stop in, eat at Dumbo in that fantastic neighborhood down on the waterfront, walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, and then spend some time in Lower Manhattan, do an afternoon tour of the financial district. And maybe you're going to talk about Wall Street and American finance, or maybe you're going to talk about the incredible American Revolutionary history that's down there and the birth of our modern nation. But that combination of explore a neighborhood, I would vote for Brooklyn Heights. Some people might say Greenwich Village, or there's lots of great neighborhoods to explore and really kind of just wander. Don't necessarily set a course or an agenda. Just say, we're going to go to this neighborhood. We're going to get off at this subway station. We're going to wander. We're going to walk. And then we're going to do something next.
Yeah, the neighborhoods are really interesting. There's so many of them. Just like a really quick rundown. I love Harlem. I live in Harlem. I think it's a great neighborhood to explore. I think it really defies a lot of people's expectations.
I agree with that.
There's so much great culture. There's so much great food. There are a lot of great tours that will take you around, and then you can go and explore on your own afterwards if you would like. If you love like the arts and like a more bohemian feel, Greenwich Village is a great option for you. If you like shopping, Soho, you got to go to Soho. I think it has the best shopping in New York City, in my opinion. If you like history, Lower Manhattan is great. I also really
love, if you love architecture and this sort of like, what would it be like to be a billionaire and live in New York City, the Upper East Side, walking up Madison Avenue from 59th Street, up into the 60s and 70s, and going over to Park Avenue to see the big apartments, and then over closer towards Fifth Avenue between Fifth and Madison to see all the old late Gilded Age mansions where there are still millionaires and billionaires living today, and picking up on little snippets of conversations that you might overhear on the street. That's another great place to explore.
You'll feel like you're in Gossip Girl. You really will. I even had my tour
or
group
Succession.
there.
One
They
or
were
the
like,
other.
we feel like we're in Gossip Girl. And I also want to say, because I don't think it's an individual one on the list, that Chinatown is my personal favorite foodie destination. Where I grew up, I didn't have access to a lot of authentic Asian food. And now whenever I leave New York City, I find myself missing Chinatown the most. And you could just go into these, they look like the storefronts look like nothing. And you go in and you're going to have some of the most amazing cuisine of your life. And it's going to cost so little. It's a great foodie destination on a budget.
And my background is in the fine arts. So one of the things that I think is often really surprising to people is that if you go over to a neighborhood like Chelsea, in the mid 20s, 23rd Street up to 27th Street, 28th Street, maybe a little further south down to 18th Street, from 9th Avenue West, you can go into 100, literally 100 free commercial galleries that are showing some of the most famous contemporary artists in the world. And maybe you don't know a lot about contemporary art. Maybe you want to see what this is all about, what it's like to see some crazy stuff, maybe to see some famous artists that you've heard about and never been to a museum. And these are all free. And so that can be really exciting just to wander around there. There's some great places to get little bites of food, and it's right by the High Line. So if you were thinking that you wanted to do the High Line, not necessarily on this short list, but if you're doing the High Line, hop down off the High Line along that region and drop into some of these galleries. They're free, they're open to the public, and they're often in these interesting old commercial buildings, warehouses, taxi garages. So they've got a great, interesting feel to them. All right. So that's Explore a Neighborhood.
And there's Sports Mega Complex in Chelsea as well.
Chelsea
which
Piers.
is,
how do you know about Chelsea Piers?
I figure skate there, but it's also important if you're traveling. I remember my brother, he loves sports, and we traveled when he was much younger to New York City, and he got what my mom called the heebie-jeebies, and we took him to Chelsea Piers, and he was able to like run around and get them all out. Am I not allowed to say that?
Funny. I love that. So we have one thing left on our short list of must-sees here in New York City. And I think it's one of the things that people were probably wondering if we were going to talk about, and that is
take a tour.
Oh, we said take a tour.
Oh, take a tour. Okay.
Take a tour, but you really should take a tour. There are so many different tour options. Well, you know what? We'll talk about that at the end.
Well, we have a whole episode about taking a tour.
We do.
If you're interested in taking a tour, we have a whole episode about taking a tour, but you need to take a tour. You need to take a tour.
And those tours can be 3 hours, 2 hours. It's not a huge commitment. And again, there's a whole range of different budget levels for those tours. Watch the episode. It's going to cover that. But a tour is really the best way to get that insider perspective on a particular neighborhood or a particular bit of New York City history. But the one last thing that we haven't talked about is eat a New York City food group. What are the New York City food groups, Megan?
The New York City food groups are bagels, hot dogs, pizza, and cheesecake. And I've recently started throwing pastrami in there as well. And I think we also throw in sort of like eat an ethnic food, something that isn't a food that you would normally get in your hometown.
And I love Chinese food. I was raised eating Chinese food in Chinatown, and it's one of like my great pleasures. When I have a few minutes and I say, oh, you know what, where am I going to go get lunch? I will often say, can I get to Chinatown fast enough? Like, am I going to be able to squeeze this in? So I definitely think that Chinese food is one of the great things. The Chinese are here in New York City very early on, and it's a long established community in Manhattan's Lower Manhattan, Chinatown. So I always love to recommend that. But maybe you want to go to Little Italy and eat a cannoli. That's something that not a lot of people do. But those 5 food groups, are they 5 food groups? I wasn't even counting.
I think we technically get up to 6. I don't know. I think we technically get up to 6. But we also have an entire episode about food. So you could really deep dive into where we recommend you get these food groups.
I just ate at one of the pizza places.
You
That we were,
did?
yeah. There's so many good pizza places. I really think that's honestly one of the number one things that you have to do. I think pizza is fantastic. Bagels would be my number 2. If I were going to rank them, pizza and then bagels. I could just live on pizza and bagels. I think I said that in the episode.
I really
I
like
went to
pizza and
Upside Pizza
bagels.
the other day.
Oh, it's so good. I'm very jealous. We've been eating student tour, like when you have large groups, there's only a certain number of restaurants that can really accommodate large groups. And now I'm dreaming of food in Chinatown or pizza.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny. I think that's one of the things that we've experienced. We've done almost all of these things with the student groups that we bring into New York City. But eating New York City food is one of the things that student groups often can't do. There's budget and time and capacity restrictions for all of that. And I think one of the great things about traveling on your own, we have a lot of people in these groups who say, I've gotten a taste of New York City and I can't wait to come back. And I say, boy, you are going to love the food when you come back and you eat on your own and you schedule all of your snack breaks and menu items. But those are the top things that we both, and this is really fun for us because we sat down to do this list and it was like every time we came up with something, we were like saying it at exactly the same time. These are really universal, kind of like the best fast list for how you want to start planning that first visit to New York City.
Absolutely. So I hope that this episode helped you figure out a list of must-sees for your next trip to New York City. Feel free to share it with someone who you think would also benefit. Also, if you would be so kind as to leave a positive review, it really helps us, as well as liking and subscribing. It will help us help you have a most marvelous trip to New York City.
And when you come to Times Square, don't forget to get yourself on that billboard.
timesquarebillboard.com. Use the code Megan10 for 10% off.
We'll see you in the city soon.
Thank you so much.